In 2016, we moved into my grandparents' house because they decided to downsize. I was 9 years old at the time. They had built the place in the early 90s, and it sits on 5 acres out on the outskirts of a small southern town. Woods and open fields stretch around it, and a slow, muddy river winds past our southern fence line. On 2 sides, our property touches the land of our only neighbors. Their property was an odd, crooked patch of acreage, and their house felt like it was sinking into the ground. That house was ancient. The original farmhouse had been constructed in the 1920s, and over the years, additions had been made in all the wrong ways, as if someone had stapled extra rooms together without a plan. The siding was discolored and looked soft. Every time you glanced at it, it just looked wet, even on dry days. The yard was a nightmare. Overgrown bushes were tangled with vines. Broken fountains were surrounded by weeds. Gnomes were missing heads, and old trash that looked like it had been there for years was scattered about. Grocery bags flapped in the tree branches. A rusted lawnmower sat in the middle of the grass, like it had died mid-job and was never moved. It was the kind of place that made you want to hold your breath when you walked by. At that time, the house was home to 2 elderly sisters, Violet and Agnes, and 3 kids. Violet was the quieter of the 2 sisters, always sitting on the porch in a faded green rocking chair, just watching the trees. Agnes was sharper and more active, but she still moved like her bones hurt. Both women were at least in their 70s. The children were their grandchildren. The boy, Liam, was my age and in my grade at school. The other 2 were girls named Allison and Kelsey, who were the same age as my younger sister. Liam was weird. I didn't like him and didn't want to hang out with him, but since we were in the same class, we often ended up together. He took that as a green light to just show up at my house whenever he felt like it, no knocking or texting required. I'd be playing a game in my room and turn around, and he'd just be there. One time, I looked out my window and saw him doing cannonballs in our pool. Another time, he walked straight into the kitchen, opened our fridge, and started eating a slice of leftover pizza as if it were perfectly normal. When we did hang out, he wasn't fun. He was obsessed with anime, really obsessed. But I didn't watch any, so I had no idea what he was talking about. He'd say weird lines in Japanese and get mad when I didn't laugh. Sometimes he'd get this look in his eyes like he was imagining something violent. One time he chased me with sharp garden shears, swinging them around and laughing like it was a game. Another time, we were on an old wooden bridge that crosses the creek near the back of our properties, and I'm certain he tried to push me in. He claimed it was just a joke, but the way he smiled afterward told me he meant it. The other 2 kids, Allison and Kelsey, were different. They were quiet and almost invisible. Their clothes were always dirty, and they had speech impediments that made it hard to understand them. It was obvious that no one at home was helping them. Their voices were garbled, like they were still toddlers, even though they were 7. They flinched easily and always looked hungry. Their dad was in and out of jail, so he wasn't around much. And then there was the mum, Teresa. The first time I saw her, she was trying to connect a hose to the spigot at the edge of their property, right near our side yard. She was tall, much taller than anyone else in her family, and heavy-set, with long, thick, curly black hair and glasses that looked like they belonged in the 80s. She seemed different, put together in a way the rest of the family wasn't. Her clothes were clean, and her hair was always styled. She smiled at me as if she'd been waiting for me to come over. She asked if I could help her with the faucet because it was stuck. I walked over and turned it, and it moved easily. She gasped and clapped her hands, telling me I was so strong and how lucky she was that I had come over. I felt proud. She made me feel like I was special. Then she asked, "Did you know you have a third eye?" I blinked. "What?" She smiled wider and said, "We all have one. Not a physical eye, but a spiritual one." She added, "It lets you see the truth, whatever that meant." Before I could ask anything else, she started walking back toward her house and told me to come with her, so I did. The inside of their house hit me like a wave of rot. It smelled like spoiled food, mildew, and something else I couldn't identify. Trash was everywhere. Garbage bags were torn open, rotting food was on plates, furniture was stained, and even dirty diapers were stuffed behind the couch. I tried to leave, but Teresa grabbed my wrist and led me upstairs. Her room was nothing like the rest of the house. It was pristine, with pink wallpaper, clean carpet, shelves full of porcelain dolls, and very ornate old furniture. The air smelled like rose water and old perfume. It was like I had stepped into a different building. She gestured for me to sit on a little cushioned stool in the corner and then walked over to her vanity and opened a drawer. She pulled out a silver tray holding a black candle, a crystal, and a thick leather-bound book. The moment I saw the pentagram on the cover, my stomach turned. My parents are Catholic. I knew what that symbol meant, and suddenly I started seeing it everywhere. On the jewelry box, on the mirror's frame, and peeking out from under the corner of the rug on the floor, etched into the wood. I jumped up. "Sorry, my mum wants me home. Bye." I didn't wait for a response. I ran. In 2019, Agnes had a heart attack and died inside the house. I heard she collapsed in the living room in front of all the kids. I went to the funeral. It was in a run-down Baptist church on the edge of town. The family was stone-faced, as if they didn't know how to react, except for one woman who I'd never seen before. She sat in the second pew, sobbing so loud it echoed. Nobody acknowledged her. That same year, Liam disappeared. The story was that he tried to harm one of the twins and was sent to a psychiatric facility. I never got the full details, but that night, my parents called my sister and me into their room and made it very clear that we were never to go near that family again. I remember their faces, grim and serious. That's when it all clicked. All the little things I hadn't understood, the weird stuff, the fear. Eventually, the rest of the family moved away. They left Violet behind, just an old, frail woman living alone in that collapsing house. She passed away in 2020, alone in that house. Her estate went up for auction. A few months later, one of my old elementary school teachers, Mrs. S., bought it along with her husband. They tore down most of the structure, but kept the original 1920 section, the same part where Teresa's room had been. Mrs. S. invited us over to see the renovations. It was beautiful. Open floor plan, all new appliances, and fresh paint. She showed us upstairs, and that's when my skin started crawling. We were in her room, and I could feel it. Even though the floors were carpeted now, I knew the pentagram was still there, as if the floor remembered. I felt nauseous, like something was watching me from the walls. I told Mrs. S. I had a headache and had to leave. She was disappointed. I was supposed to stay for dinner. I avoided the house after that until last year. Mrs. S. asked me to dog sit while they went out of town for a week. I said yes. I figured it was just a job, easy money. Every night, I'd ring the doorbell, and they'd buzz me in through the smart lock. Their dogs, a Shih Tzu named Muffin and a snorting little pug named Henry, would greet me, tails wagging. The first 4 nights were quiet, even peaceful. I'd feed the dogs, play with them a bit, turn on the porch light, and lock up. But on the last night, as I was about to leave, Henry started barking at the staircase. He planted his little legs and just barked over and over. Muffin backed away, whimpering. There was nothing there. And then a thump. It came from upstairs. Another thump, louder this time. I didn't stay to investigate. I ran to the front door, slammed it behind me, and locked it. The whole walk home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. Now it's 2025. We hadn't heard a word about the family for over 4 years. That is, until recently. A girl from school told me she saw Teresa at a farmer's market in a nearby town. Apparently, she started some kind of religious group and calls herself a truth seer. They live in a mobile home community far out in the woods. Flyers have started popping up on bulletin boards and telephone poles. I don't trust it. I don't trust her. I think Teresa is truly evil. I mean, she neglected her kids. She left her mother in that house to rot. And I think she brought something into it. Something dark. Something that stayed behind. I still have nightmares about her and Liam. They stand at the foot of my bed, staring at me, not speaking at all. And every time I pass by that house, even now, I get chills. The good parts, like the paint and the furniture, are just surface level. That place remembers, and I don't think it ever let go of what happened there. Story 2 asterisk, my name is Keegan, and I live in Michigan with my parents. High school was a decent time for me because I got to meet various new people. Obviously, I also had some friends I spent time with outside of school. The only time I really hung out with them was at places like the local community center, where we would work out and play basketball. Back in freshman year, it was getting close to the end of the year, and I was excited for summer break to be coming. I would be starting drivers, training, and even start doing a side job to begin making some money. So, my start wasn't the fastest. I had this one friend named Clayton. I would usually hang out with him at least once a week. He was a grade below me, his final year of junior high. We were somewhat good friends, and my dad and I even took him to a Detroit Pistons basketball game at one point. He was a big basketball fan, so he was eager to attend his first game. Despite all the fun activities we had done, it was only when I started getting busier that he began to change. He would often get sad or angry because I wasn't free on a specific day. He had intense anger issues when he got pissed off enough. I remember one day when I told him I wasn't free again and that I would be home cleaning. It seemed like he found the days when I wasn't available to hang out. I didn't check my phone until after I finished cleaning and found out that he had removed me on Snap. I messaged him on Messenger, asking why he got so mad and why he decided to remove me as a friend. He assumed I was lying to avoid hanging out with him. That thought had crossed my mind for a while, and I even followed up on it at times because he was starting to become more annoying. Sometimes I would lie and say I was doing something, going somewhere, or had already made plans with another friend. He felt so left out that one day, after the sun had set, he showed up at my apartment, unannounced. I asked him why he didn't text me ahead of time. He just stared at me for a few seconds before slowly walking away. Why was he here at this hour? Why didn't he say anything? Why did he just give me this 1,000-yard stare as if I had done something to offend him? I hadn't spoken to him the next day. That's also when I turned off my Snap Map on Snapchat to hide my location from him after he apparently added me back. Some time passed, about a month, and he was still the same person, angry or sad when I couldn't visit. That's when I got a text from my friend Nick, who I barely saw in person. He knew Clayton and his ex-girlfriend. Nick told me some gruesome things about him and what he had done, but my heart dropped as I heard from him and Clayton's ex that he had held a knife at his ex-girlfriend's throat and sexually assaulted her. I knew right then that he was a psycho. I removed him as a friend on all platforms without hesitation. He texted me on Instagram before I removed him there too. He blew up my phone with messages asking why I was removing him. I just told him I needed some time to myself and that I would add him back when I was better. But I used that as an excuse to get away from him. That night, while I was home alone, my parents had gone to the next town over for dinner with some old friends. I heard a knock at my apartment door. I looked out the peephole and no one was there. I opened the door a crack to look down the hallway, but no one was there. I figured someone was playing Ding Dong Ditch and wouldn't come back. But when I randomly looked out my bedroom window, the light by the sidewalk was burned out. I noticed a small flash in the corner of my eye, and I thought it was from inside a car. But I felt my stomach drop when I saw a tall figure standing in front of my window. It was him. I opened my window and told him to go away and that I didn't want him there. He told me to let him in so he could tell me something. I firmly said no and told him I wanted him gone. But when he began to move, I noticed something was in his hand. I couldn't exactly make out what he was holding until he held it up. And when I tell you I was frightened, I felt as if I were going to pass out because, you wouldn't believe it, Clayton was holding a knife. I told him I was calling the police, but he had already taken off by the time the police arrived. I gave the best description of him that I could to the cops. I haven't heard a word about or from him since that horrific night. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if you were trying to kill me while I was home alone. I believe he had murderous intentions. I assumed he probably ended up in juvie after what happened. Not only was I horrified from that experience, but it may have been one of the most traumatic moments of my life. Having my parents gone made it feel undeniably more unsettling. I'm glad I disconnected all contact from him when I did, because I think if I had continued to remain friends with him, I probably could have ended up as one of his punching bags, or even worse, dead. Story 3 *. This happened in late 2022, when I went on what I thought would be a fun and simple first date with someone I matched with on a dating app. Her name was Emily, and we had been texting for about 2 weeks before deciding to meet up. We both loved horror movies, and when Smile came out, we agreed that seeing it together would be the perfect first date. We picked a weekday night, Thursday. It was a late showing, 10:15 p.m., at a small, older theater just outside of town. I offered to drive and picked her up around 9:30. She seemed normal, friendly, maybe a little shy. She was quiet for most of the drive, but opened up once we started talking about horror movies we liked growing up. When we got there, the parking lot was almost empty. I joked that the theater looked like something out of a horror movie itself. Dim lights, flickering neon, and no one in the lobby when we walked in. There was only one guy working at the concession counter. When I asked if the theater would be full, he laughed and said we were the only ones who had bought tickets for that showing. At first, I thought that was great. No crowds, just me, her, and the movie. We went into Theater 6 and chose seats right in the center, about 4 rows from the back. It was freezing in there, which Emily pointed out right away. I offered her my hoodie, and we laughed about how creepy it felt being the only ones in the entire room. We sat back and talked while waiting for the previews to start. I was starting to feel a little chemistry between us and figured this would be one of those dates where you actually end up seeing the person again. Then, right before the movie started, just after the last trailer, and just as the lights dimmed lower, I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. Someone walked into the theater. They didn't say anything or stop to look around or check their phone for seat numbers like most people do. They walked in slow, straight up the steps, and sat directly behind us. I mean directly. There were maybe 100 open seats, but he chose the one right behind me. Emily turned to look at him too, and she gave me a weird glance like, really? I kind of chuckled and sat under my breath. Figures. But right away, something felt off. You know that feeling when someone's eyes are burning into the back of your head? That's what it felt like. I glanced back after a minute or two. He wasn't watching the screen. He was staring at us. I only saw him for a split second, but he didn't flinch or look away. He didn't even pretend to be interested in the movie. He was just sitting forward, a bit like someone might do if they were really into a scene. But his face wasn't even turned toward the screen. It was angled right at us, at me. I whispered to Emily, "He's just staring." She nodded slowly and whispered back, "I know." We tried to ignore it for a while. The movie started, and I really did try to get into it. But every few minutes, I'd feel it again. The presence behind us, not just someone being annoying. This was different. There was an intensity to it, like he was waiting for something. After about 20 minutes, I leaned forward in my seat and turned my head a little so I could glance back more casually. Same thing. He was still staring. He was middle-aged, maybe late 40s, was clean-shaven, kind of pale, wearing a dark grey hoodie. Something about him just looked empty, like he wasn't even there mentally. His eyes didn't look glazed over like someone who was zoning out. From what I saw, he never blinked. I turned back around and whispered to Emily, "This guy is really creeping me out." She looked genuinely scared now. "Do you want to move?" We considered it, but where would we go? It would still be in the same room, and we were already in the best seats. Moving might make it awkward or even provoke him. A few minutes later, I felt something. The guy breathed on me, not loud or exaggerated. It was soft, but unmistakable. A deep, slow exhale right behind my seat. I spun around, and he was leaning forward over the back of my seat, his face closer than it should have been. I stared at him and said, "Dude, can you not?" He didn't respond. He just slowly leaned back in his seat. That was it. I told Emily, "Let's move." We got up and walked down to the front corner row. It sucked, and the angle was bad, but we needed distance. I could barely focus on the movie anymore. Just kept glancing back every couple of minutes. And every time I looked back there, he was staring straight at us. He didn't budge. Around halfway through the movie, we heard footsteps. He was coming down the steps. Emily grabbed my arm, and we both held still. The footsteps stopped a few rows above us. We didn't turn around. I didn't know how long he stood there. I didn't dare look. Then finally, he walked back up to the top row. I whispered, "We need to leave." She nodded. We grabbed our stuff and slipped out quietly. As we exited the theater and went down the hallway toward the lobby, I glanced back through the glass window in the theater door. He was standing in the aisle now. He wasn't watching the screen. He was just standing there, still staring at us. We went straight to the front and told the concession guy that someone was acting really weird in Theater 6. His smile faded instantly, and he said, "Again?" "What do you mean again?" I said, and he hesitated, then said, "He's been coming in randomly for like a month. Always late shows and never buys anything. You guys aren't the first ones to complain about him." I responded, "Why hasn't anyone kicked him out?" He looked uncomfortable. He said he doesn't technically do anything illegal. Management says unless he touches someone or breaks a rule, we can't really do much. Emily was almost in tears. She asked if someone could walk us to our car. He agreed, and one of the janitors walked us out. The guy didn't follow us that night, at least not that we saw. But the whole ride back, I couldn't shake this fear that he might have written down my license plate, that he might have followed us at a distance, watched us leave, and found out where Emily lived when I dropped her off. For weeks afterward, I was paranoid. My cop friend also told me it was a load of horseshit that they couldn't do anything about him. He believed the theater, as a business, would reserve the right to kick someone out. I avoided that side of town for a while. Emily and I talked a few times after that, but we never ended up seeing each other again, unfortunately. I think we were both too shaken from what happened. I have not been back to that theater since. I don't see any reviews on the website about the guy. I wonder just how many people have actually had the same experience.